Hi there and welcome.
You're listening to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm.
My name is Avantika, and I'm a researcher exploring animal consciousness, environmental sustainability, and planetary health. I want to help bring animal perspectives to the table and transform our relationship with the natural world.
And I'm Barbara. I'm an animal communicator and retired veterinarian. My true passion is exploring the hearts and souls of animals and helping people come to a much deeper understanding of who the animals truly are at their core.
This podcast is for anyone who loves animals and nature and has an interest in their own personal and spiritual development. We'll bring you powerful conversations with fascinating people about animal and nature sentience, consciousness, and communication.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love, respect, understanding, and care for the fellow beings who share our beautiful Mother Earth with us.
Hello and welcome to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's episode is all about the amazing work that therapy dogs and service animals do, and all about animal-assisted interventions. We're so excited to welcome Dr. Colleen Dell, who's going to tell us all about the work that she's done in this field. Colleen currently works at the University of Saskatchewan here in Canada, and her background is in criminal justice, mental health, substance use health, and Indigenous health. And while she was on a sabbatical several years ago, she was thinking about what really made her happy and brought her joy and how to bring that into the work that she does every day. And the answer to that question was her dogs and the animals. So she decided to direct that love and admiration for animals into her research. And now her research involves both humans and animals, and she examines how the human-animal bond can help enrich our lives and help us with our well-being and health. She sees the animals as colleagues, as co-researchers, and they've gone together and worked together as a team in addictions treatment facilities, in hospital emergency rooms, COVID vaccination clinics, and the list keeps going on. I met Colleen a few years ago, and I'm so grateful that we crossed paths the way that we did, because it's through her that I learned about the research that was happening on interspecies communication. And now we've had the pleasure of working together on an international symposium on that topic. So we're so grateful that she could be here with us today. Welcome, Colleen. And we're also so excited to have your dog, Molly, joining us today, too.
Molly is here as well. Yeah. Thank you for having us both.
Welcome, Colleen, and welcome, Molly. And you said that Molly is a new part of your family, right? She's just been with you a short time.
Yeah, this is her, actually, Thursday will be 2 months.
Yeah. Oh, welcome, Molly. She's so cute. So, Colleen, how did you actually get involved with animals in the beginning? How did you end up taking that direction?
Yeah, I was, my background is in Indigenous health and mental health and addictions. And I was just getting to the point where it's a very taxing, both of them health issues are very difficult issues. And I think I was getting to the point where I needed to do something else, in particular in the addictions, right? And so someone had said to me, so I was thinking, oh my gosh, I need to do something else. Maybe I won't be a professor anymore, right? And then someone said, well, you have a sabbatical coming up. What is something you love? Maybe you can, merge topics or think of different topics or something. And I said, I love my dogs. So I went home and I Googled dogs and addiction. And there was one study in a treatment center at that time. And I was like, oh, and it came up and then it talked about therapy dogs. And I was like, what is a therapy dog? I don't even know what that is. And it just was a natural home. It was a natural place for me because with an Indigenous worldview and Indigenous health, it's not about the absence of the disease, right, as it is in a Western worldview, but it's about, our relationship with each other, our relationship with the environment, our relationship with the animals. It's about all these relationships and connections. And that fits so beautifully when I start to think about what is the role of animals in our life. And then I landed in a One Health framework, which is just a Western way of looking at the connection between animals, humans, and the environment, and is quite prominent now. It's one of the signature areas at our university. And so my work fit in really nice in that. So I found a home. It all converged together really nicely for me.
Wow. That's bringing a lot of things together, isn't it?
Yeah. And it just didn't happen like that, but it did happen quite quickly, where it just made sense.
So how does animal assisted therapy fit in with drug rehabilitation? And you've also done some work in prisons, I know. So how does that all fit together?
Yeah, it really is about that connection and recognizing that connection that we have with animals and that reciprocal connection. So if you take the American Veterinary Association, their definition of the human-animal bond is that give and take, that reciprocal relationship that we have with the animals. And we refer to that as connection, right? And within the addictions field, there's been more and more attention to the importance of connection in individuals' recovery. So that hasn't really been a focus in the past, but you're seeing more and more attention to it. And there was a wonderful TED Talk by Josh Horry, and one of the sentiments that he made, and he wrote a book as well, and he talked about a connection is the opposite of addiction. And with that understanding, it just fits beautifully with the animals, because our work in the prison system and in the jails as well is that connection that people can build with the animals is non-judgmental, right? It's not dependent on certain conditions. I always say, animals don't care if you smell. In fact, the more you smell, the better, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you haven't bathed in 3 days. None of that really matters to them, except this more authentic relationship that you can have with them. Again, so that overlapping concept of connection.
Yeah, so it seems like it's easier to connect with a dog than people for a lot of us, just because they are so unconditionally loving and non-judgmental and all that stuff. So I would think that people who are struggling might actually relate to animals much more easily than they would to other people.
Yeah.
Have you found that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the dogs are bringing expectations with them. And I think what's important to point out in that too is that the relationship with the dog, it's how we perceive that. So we talk about dogs as not judging, but maybe they are judging. I don't know, right? We perceive them not to be judging because that's how we've socially identified and created them, right? So I think that's the important point there, is just this perceived relationship we have with them. But I also think it's an authentic and a real relationship, right? It's just we only know so much about dogs, for example, at this point, right?
Yeah. And Colleen, last time we spoke, you also told us about some of the work you did in COVID vaccination clinics.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we have been in the hospital in the emergency department here in Saskatoon, I think since 2016. We had Murphy, the therapy dog, was the first therapy dog in an emergency department in Canada. He started visiting in 2016. And then we had other therapy dogs who were visiting in the emergency department since that time. So we had a lot of protocols that were developed for zoonotic disease transference, like disease from animals to humans, right? So, sanitizing hands before and after a visit, everything that goes with that to make sure it was as healthy as a visit as possible. So when COVID happened and then we had the vaccination clinics, it was just a natural. I mean, so many people are fearful of needles, fearful of getting the vaccine, but they wanted to get it because of all of the misunderstanding or lack of understanding, right, at that time, and still today. So we thought we should have the therapy dogs there, right? And if for nothing else, a distraction, and in particular for the children, of having that distraction. So yeah, it was a really easy process because I think we had already been in the emergency department. So if you can be there with a dog, pretty easy to transfer that to a vaccination clinic. So yeah, it didn't take long. We worked with the Saskatchewan Health Region here in Saskatoon, and yeah, we got the dogs in the vaccination clinics. Yeah,
That's amazing. You were talking about kids, but I know also, I imagine adults too, who are fearful of needles. And I think last time we spoke, you told us about a man who was really afraid and was looking forward to having the dog there again, right?
yeah. The very first time he came in, just people were terrified, and some people are terrified of needles. Some people have not received a needle in a very long time, and then they were coming in this situation, right? So yeah, he had a really hard time. I was with Annabelle, the therapy dog at the time. She passed a year ago now, but it was just him having Annabelle there, being able to have the comfort from her and the support from her just made a world of difference for him. And then he asked if the nurse and myself and Annabelle could be there 3 months later when he got the second dose. And so we said, sure. Well, the nurse took his number and called him. And he was, I'm talking really scared, like shaking and just unbelievably afraid the first time. And the second time he just came waltzing in and he was just, I was like, wow. And he's like, hey, Annabelle, and sat down and was so happy to see her. And he got to talk a lot about how easy it was for him to be there this time, and still didn't like being there and getting the needle, but it was like a 360. It was a different person. It was a different person. Yeah, it was really, and I just have story after story after story.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm curious, Colleen, what has the experience been like for the other, humans you've worked with in these different environments? How have they felt about a dog being there? Have they been receptive and open to the work that you do together?
Yeah, absolutely, overwhelmingly receptive. And we also have to make sure that we dot all our I's and cross all our T's beforehand. So for example, if when we were, or still are now for the flu clinics and COVID, at the vaccination clinic, we make sure signs are up and everyone is well aware. No one will ever approach someone with a dog unless they are asked, do you want to visit with the dog? And then they're asked that beforehand. Yeah, so all that is in place. Sometimes people do have fears and phobias of dogs as well, right? So we're very clear about that. And they're very clear, say, yeah, don't come over here, or don't come see my child, or whatever it is. Yeah, that seems to be the number one impediment to dogs being in these environments, is people like, oh, people are allergic, or people are going to like it. And it just doesn't come up that way. It hasn't transpired in that way at all.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a question about this, Colleen. You said that this was the first time a dog was in the emergency room, and maybe COVID too, COVID vaccination clinics. Has this spread to other places?
Oh, for sure. We know of 6 other emergency rooms that have then introduced dogs into them. Some have not started up again since COVID, and even at the first emergency room here, we are just starting up again and also right now emergency rooms are just so overwhelmed that even the paperwork to get the programs going again is a little bit slower, and understandably so, right? Yes, absolutely. Other vaccination clinics do have the therapy dogs. Yeah.
What has your personal experience been like, Colleen? Like the work that you've done now, you've been doing it for many years now. Mm-hmm. What have your, personal takeaways and lessons been? Anything that you'd like to share about your own journey?
I think as a researcher, that journey as a researcher, it's the things that I think we're looking for and that we're going to find with the dogs, it's incredibly surprising because we don't have a lot of understanding. There's not a lot of literature out there. For example, even like just take the addictions field, right? So let's just take the example of the emergency department. Like going in, and we did a controlled trial recently, which was wonderful. And we found that those who visited, emergency department patients who visited with the therapy dog for 10 minutes versus those who didn't, those who did had a decrease in their pain, a decrease in their anxiety, a decrease in depression, and an increase in their well-being compared. It was clinically significant, in particular that decrease in pain. The other were significant as well. So that's what we found. That was great. But one of the huge things we haven't looked at that we need to do a study on, because it just keeps coming out, is the impact on staff. Right? Okay. And that impact on staff is significant. And in particular at this time when, again, it's incredibly busy and really stressful for staff. So having the dogs there, even before right now, right, when they were there pre-COVID, it was really important to staff. And we just hear about that all the time. So having, looking at that, I think, or I'll give you another example, like the program that Darlene Chalmers and I do, positive support in our jails and prisons. So, you know, we have our goals of the program and we run it like we do in partnership with the prison or the jail. And one thing that we didn't anticipate was how those participating in the program would really take on an animal welfare type of understanding with the dogs. And again, we were talking about addiction and recovery plans and things. And then one of the key findings that they took out of it, in particular in our jail we were just working with, is that again, this relationship that you can have with an animal, and it's not a dominant over. And so when we bring in the dogs, and individuals are like, oh my gosh, you treat them so respectfully and so nice, and they listen to you. Oh, they do all these tricks and all this stuff. And so that's very different than, and you think about masculinity in prison, right? And this, I have this pit bull and I'm dominant over this really strong dog. That's really different. And helps to shape how they see the animal when we are doing programming with them. So again, an unanticipated outcome, not what we were thinking around animal welfare and how you viewed the animal, but is definitely, again, something that came out. And so we're always learning. So we learn and just always making sure that we're thinking and being aware of whatever's happening, whether it's from the individual side and point of view, the participant from our own, or from the animal as well, and being always aware of their behavior and their welfare.
I imagine that the impact that this work has probably is on so many different levels, and some are being measured and quantified and others are probably not. And even in terms of, you know, timeline, I imagine that some of the impact can continue to happen, or some of the, you know, unanticipated consequences can continue to happen over someone's lifespan.
Well, and that's, yeah, and that's really interesting, because with the therapy dogs in particular, people ask, well, you know, you take these dogs into the prison and then you leave, right? Are you causing more trauma from traumatic bonds and stuff? Absolutely not. And no one we have ever worked with has ever said that. So number one, we have a Facebook page, Annabelle and Subi's Adventures, and every day I update on there what the dogs are up to every day. So you can still follow them and connect with them and see what's going on, right? And then the other side is that individuals, in particular in prison, talk about once that bond is established, it's there and it doesn't go anywhere. And the closest thing I can say, and I'm sure there's academic terms for this I have yet to look up, but I think about my grandmother and her passing and her support. And even as, you know, being younger in my 20s when she passed, I still feel that support. Like, it's never not going to be a part of me. It's just so much a part of me, right? And so I just always kind of use that analogy of how I hear the prisoners talk about the dogs when they came into their lives. And I think I think a few things. For the most part, if you haven't had trusting, authentic relationships, for example, like the people in prison or many people with addictions, health issues, if you haven't had that and then you experienced it, that's going to be transformational, right? And that's something you're never going to take out of you. It's just a part of you, and you're going to remember that, and you're going to carry that, right? So I think that's really important to think about it in that way, that these individuals may be experiencing something for the first time, right, with these dogs. And I know at the Regional Psychiatric Center, where we have a program too, one of the individuals, he talks about, he said, when the dogs aren't with me, I can see them wagging their tails beside me, the 3 dogs at that time that he was working with. And it was like, this was an interview, and it was like such a profound quote, because this is after he hadn't been working with them anymore. And then for the most part, for the people in prison, we do send pictures the best we can, and then the workers try to find them wherever they're at. They may be at a new institution, but we do an update to them from the dogs.
Wow. I'm curious about the interaction with prisoners or with other people that you work with. Do they have a chance to have a really in-depth one-on-one experience with the dogs, or is it like there's a room full of people and a few dogs, and how does that work?
In the prisons, it is, for example, at the Regional Psychiatric Center, we do animal-assisted therapy. So it's a half hour. One session is a half hour, but we do them in terms, like September to December weekly, and then January to April. So sometimes people might do just one term, they may be being released, or they may do 2 terms. We had someone do 3 terms, right? So in that case, or that situation, we have the therapist, we have the dog, we have me as the handler, and then you have the participant. And that's completely their time with the dog. That is just in however they want that time to be, in however they're connecting. So, and that's where our role, myself or Darlene, in doing this animal assisted therapy model, our role is to facilitate with the dog, right? Is kind of be that between person. So if they were working on something in particular, I might be having a story about this particular dog and whatever they were doing at home, or the relationships between the dogs, if they're working with self-confidence, whatever the concepts are, we try to bring that from the dog's experience. But then we are also always following the lead of the dog. Again, always making sure their welfare is number one, making sure they're happy with what they're doing, they're comfortable, they're not too tired. And then just, again, following their lead. So Molly here, who's very tired today, she's a, oh, you heard your name. Yeah, okay.
And she gets a treat. Yeah.
Not too tired for a cookie. Yeah.
Never too tired for a cookie.
Never. So she's a good example, because she did her first visit last week. So when Molly came from a home, she had to be rehomed, and we did some testing with her, because coming into our home, we wanted another bulldog as a family member, but I wanted to work with her if I was able to, right? So we did testing with her in the beginning, and she just loves people, right? So I just want to give an aside here too. People often ask, how do I train my dog to be a therapy dog? And I always say, you can't. You just can't. A therapy dog, we can train a dog to be obedient, right? Or I could train a dog to sit on a chair, or on a Zoom or whatever, right? But I can't train a dog to like people. No one can. So it really is about who that dog is. And I think that's so important, because when the dogs are interacting with people, it has to be authentic, right? People know whether that dog wants to be there, and so forth. So anyways, Molly went to the Regional Psychiatric Center last week for the first time, and she was absolutely amazing. So I knew she loved people. It was really obvious whenever I take her out, or people come here, but she was able to match. There were 3 patients from the psychiatric center that she worked with, and she matched their energy, I would say, for it. So the first person came in, he was quite agitated, very active, and she was very active. So she was running around. She actually had the zoomies, and she doesn't often get the zoomies, but she had the zoomies in the prison. And he was doing sits and stays and all this stuff he had been doing with EJ, the other dog, prior, and Raina as well. And yeah, so it was really, she was just totally up to it. And I was like, this is really interesting. Okay. Second person came in, and he had a sore hip, and he was very down emotionally. So he sat on the couch, and I asked Molly if she wanted to get on the couch, and she did. She's never been on a couch. She's not allowed on furniture except this chair. So she jumped on the couch. We helped her up, and she sat with this individual who, again, was very kind of solemn. And she sat like that, but very happy. She was like really happy, and just sat like she was looking at him, like on his side right here. And it was just kept like that. And when he would stop petting her, she'd pet, as dogs typically do. It was like, pet me. It was completely just, she sat there the whole time, just with him in just this really quiet type demeanor. And then the third person was a mix of both. He was very active. And then at the beginning, he was very quiet with her, just getting to know her. And so again, sat on the couch really well. And then he thought, okay, I feel like we're establishing a relationship here. I want to do some healing with her. So they were walking around, and then he's like, I'm going to take off the lead and see if she'll walk with me. And she absolutely did, which was quite amazing to see, given that she just met this individual. So
Wow,
yeah.
She's pretty good.
She's very good.
Mm-hmm.
I shared this story about Raymond at the prison, and it really just exemplifies how life-changing the animals could be. And so Raymond, and he had been in, or is still incarcerated in Canada at the federal level for at least 20 years at that time. And we took in Annabelle. This is the first time we had Darlene and I had the positive support program at Drumheller Prison. And we started with 5 individuals. And these 5 individuals had all recently overdosed. And so that was a huge concern for the warden. And he said, well, why don't we try to bring in the dog program, right? And see if this could be of help, because they're kind of at a loss of what to do to help individuals. So we came in with Kisby, Annabelle, and Subi at the time. Darlene and I, and we ran our program. We designed the program. We ran the program. And what was really interesting, everyone had their own relationship with the dog. But for Raymond in particular, again, hadn't seen a dog in 20, well, hadn't touched. He had seen drug dogs, and he hadn't touched a dog in 20 years. And so you can just imagine on that level alone, right? Like the impact it can have. But he was very institutionalized, tattooed from head to toe kind of thing, very closed off with his body language and all of that. And so I think we were on day 2, it was in the afternoon, and Darlene and I were encouraging him to communicate through his body language and everything about his being with Annabelle. And what he had to do was they had a badminton net set up, and badminton rackets were hanging down from it. And we kind of had this obstacle course. And Annabelle was sitting here, and there's the badminton net, and she's like, yeah, I'm not going to go under there. No, thanks. Not with those brackets hanging down. And I knew she could, but she's like, nope, don't like them. So Darlene and I were on either side of Annabelle. Raymond's here on the other side of the net. And we're like, Raymond, you have to be like your authentic self. Like, you just have to really connect with her. And so he was just like, Annabelle, come, like that. And it was like, no, kinder, gentler, ask kindly, just be yourself. And then it kind of got softer and softer a bit. And then at one point, it was probably 2 minutes, but it felt like 20. And he's like, Annabelle, come. And we're like, what? And all of a sudden, Annabelle went under the net into his waiting arms, right? So it was like, oh, he was so proud. And he really got to get rid of all those layers, those 20 years of layers that are on him, to connect with her. And then she came. right? So fine, this is all wonderful. And then a couple days later, we were doing this obstacle course, and we had about 40 other prisoners came in to watch what the guys have bonded with the dogs, right? They're our participants. So Annabelle would only do what Annabelle wanted to do. And she did she'd done the obstacle course a few times actually. And then she was going again with one of the participants, and there was this like a beam that she had to walk on. She got halfway through it and she sat down. And she wasn't moving. She's like, I'm done. And that was her. If she was walking outside with me and I don't want to walk anymore, she just lie down. Like that was it. Yep, that was her. So before I could go to her and say, that's okay, let's go sit, I'll pick you up and we'll put you down over here. You don't want to participate anymore. That's great. Before I could even like conceptualize what I was going to do next, Raymond came from the back of the room, scooped her up, went back to the back of the room, sat her on his knee. And I have this most beautiful picture of her with this huge smile, her tongue's hanging out, looking up at Raymond, and Raymond's looking down at her as just like, oh yeah, I gotcha, right? Oh. And you think about that relationship and what that did for him. He still speaks about it today, and we have connection. We just had a video call with him. He's in another institution, and we met in 2016, right? So that bond, that relationship, he called Annabelle his little sis. He referred to her as his sis. Like that was family. She was his family, right? And that it's just so, again, thinking for people who may not have had that, how important that is, and how a dog can provide something, because a dog comes with no strings attached, really. She's there to be with you, and you feel that, you know that. So yeah, on our video call, he got to be introduced to Molly, now that Annabelle's not with us anymore. And so that was pretty special, and that was really good.
Yeah, what a beautiful story. I just got chills and tears and everything else.
I've had goosebumps like this entire conversation so far. Yeah. It's amazing because the animals, and this is certainly what they've done for me in like my short time of having dogs, is they really helped me get to know who I really am. So I'm thinking about this gentleman and probably so many of the other participants is, like you said, like peeling those layers, and really the human that's inside, that's full of love and affection and light, gets to come out and just be. And it's just such a beautiful thing to have an animal there who can see that, who can really see you for who you are.
Absolutely. And we say, like, no matter how much we may not judge, or we say we don't judge as humans, what have you, still, if a person's been through a system and they've been judged over and over and over and over again, I represent that system. I represent all humans. Why would you not think I'm judging you?
Yeah.
Why would you not think that?
Yeah.
So the dog doesn't bring that, right? And that, I think, is the most important part there.
And it's amazing that the dogs know that. They know how to interact with people, like with certain people, like you were saying, they match the energy. And they're receptive, and they respond to each person so differently, because I think on many levels, they understand what that individual needs.
Yeah. I often think about it like I was saying, like, not every dog is a therapy dog. Probably every dog is a therapy dog in your own family. Lots of dogs don't have families and could be wonderful therapy dogs in families, right? But if I was thinking about what a dog has or possesses, it's almost like an emotional intelligence that we talk about in humans. And I've never said that before, but that is what I think that they kind of carry with them. There's a lot of people who are very in tune with other people and can read a room really quickly, can read people really quickly. I think the dogs that are therapy dogs are the ones that are really quick at doing that, and they want to be there. They want to give, right? And I think about Annabelle with another person that kind of just exemplifies that as well, is that she was an individual, an Indigenous woman who had lost her children to care. and in an addiction treatment program, and she was hard to engage. So they asked us to bring Annabelle in, and this was an outpatient program. And so the first time Annabelle met her, they were just like bonded like that. Annabelle would always sit on a table, and then she was just in her face, and they were just like staring at each other, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Right? Just like people, sometimes people connect. And I think just recognizing who that dog is and what they like, don't like, and just their ability to connect with people on different levels and different situations is really, really, really important to watch and to look for. So this individual, when she had lost her children to care, and she came back for the second session a week later, and her counselor was very happy about that because she was hard to engage. But she came back for that session, and she brought pictures of her babies in care. Oh. Who did she show?
The dog.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Right? And, speaking with the counselor, it's like, do you think she would ever have brought those pictures in to show me or you? No.
Oh.
No.
Wow.
No. Again, I represent that system no matter what, right? Especially as an Indigenous woman, having her children taken and all the colonial experiences she's had in our medical system and other systems, social system as well. That dog was a safe spot for her.
Yeah. So what's that?
No, I was just saying the trust builds very quickly when that's the foundation of the relationship.
Yeah. So I was just wondering now, you call it emotional intelligence, and that seems like one aspect, but what do you think about animal consciousness, which is kind of a theme of our podcast, and it's a kind of emerging issue these days to consider the consciousness of animals. I mean, that's really what you're talking about, isn't it?
It is, and it's just, it's just trying to unpack all of that in the way we've been taught, and trying to unpack all that in how we view, at least for myself, and how I view the world, and how I could be viewing the world in a much broader sense, right? But I think, remember when we talked, Avantika, before about, I've written, like, I'm always about sharing the animal's voice the best that I can. Mm-hmm. And so I knew when I entered this field, and I went and did some dog training in the States, and I went with Annabelle. When I returned, I wrote an article, and she became the first author. And I was doing it in a sense that I wanted, again, to recognize that this article and the training wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for her and my reflections on what happened. But there may very well have been more going on there. And even the Facebook page that I have, and I knew from the beginning it wasn't me sharing my experiences, it's me interpreting what the animals are going through in every day, what they're doing, right? So it's always signed by one of the dogs. And again, there very well may be more going on there as to why I write what I write. It's not hard for me to write what I write. I just write it. Like, it's very easy for me. I think about the words I use, right? But when the topics come to me or what have you, sometimes they don't. And some days are like, well, what are you going to say today? What did you guys do today? But most often it's just like, ding, you want to write about that, or ding, you want to write about that, right? So it's because I think about that in every single day, writing something for the last 9 years, every single day. And I've never stopped, because it's not a burden. It's not, and it could be something you'd be like, oh, why do you do that every day? Because I know it's important, but it's also not always that difficult, and most frequently not difficult, because I just know what to write.
Wow, that's amazing. Every single day for all those years. But you also wrote an obituary for Annabelle, didn't you? And what happened with that obituary?
That was really important to me, because when Kisby died the year prior, or Subi died 2 years prior to that, I mean, these dogs are very out and about a lot in their community, with a lot of media attention, and just out so much, thousands of hours, each of them, thousands, that when they pass, there's lots of attention, right? And with Annabelle, I just felt like, and she was by far, like at the vaccination clinic, she was just there so much, and it was so close to that time. And I would just felt like now's the time where I need to make a statement. And I don't know why I was thinking that. I just felt like, yeah, because I think, like I said, Annabelle just did what Annabelle wanted to do. And if she wanted to sit down, she'd sit down, right? So I think I learned from her in that way. And I just felt like we need to make a statement now with your passing, and to not use that opportunity. That's not the right words, but something like that with her passing. So I contacted Canadian Press, right? Is it Canadian Press? I think it is. That has most of the newspapers in Canada. Maybe not. Whatever it is, I contacted them and said, can I put in an obituary? So I spent all this time writing it, and it was really long, and it was really important and meaningful, and thanks all the people. She was a part of their lives, and on and on and on. And then they were like, it just kept getting rejected. And then, it's very frustrating on these online systems. And then somehow, I think, I know what he did. I asked the person who was our media contact at the U of S, I said, I can't get this through. Like, what's going on here? Or something like that. And she said, actually, my friend runs the classified division of the newspaper and is a therapy dog handler in Alberta. And so she put me in contact with him, and he said, no, absolutely not. Like, there's not a place in the newspaper for these pet obituaries unless you put them in the classified division. When I was like, that's just so wrong. It doesn't need to go in classified. She's family. She contributes so much to our community, right? Anyway, so he said he was actually working on getting pets recognized in a typical memorial area. But what he did for me is he just made the most beautiful layout of Annabelle, and she got half a page in the classified section, right? And so that, I just felt like, yeah, she just went out with a bang. Sorry, she kind of went out with a bang there and just made her mark, because that's what she did. And yeah, it was really good to do that. And I know he's a strong advocate for recognizing animals for who they are, the sentient beings that they are.
Oh, so sweet. And it was well received, wasn't it, by people?
Very
yeah.
Yeah.
So Colleen, on a little lighter note,
yeah,
what is it you love so much about these bully dogs? Why do you always have bully dogs?
I think it's their squishy face. I think it's that squishy face, but there is, oh my gosh, and I forget the word right now. Oh, I totally forget the word, but it is something about, you see it with cartoon characters too. Neoteny? It's something like that.
Yeah.
Right? It's the way that the eyes are spaced with the nose, and it really does, I think a bully breed really does replicate a human face in many ways, like the spacing. And you see that too with some cartoon characters like Disney and stuff. They make that so that they're appealing to us. So you see those in stuffy animals and things. So I don't know why. I just think, I don't know. When I was doing my PhD, I never had a dog. I had cats. And then I was only 3 or 4 months in, and I recognized I wasn't getting out at all. So then I went to a shelter with my friend, and I said, I need to get a dog because the dog's going to get me out, get me out of the house. And then there was, no one really was like, they were too big or whatever. I just didn't have a connection with anyone. Then I was leaving, and a dog was coming in, and she was a red boxer, a fawn boxer. And I kid you not, I was like, look at her, she matches my coat. What a silly thing to say. But it was like meant to be. And we went home together. So that was Roxy. And I just think the boxers are just so fun loving, just so hilarious. And as therapy dogs out in the community, they're just hilarious and so loving. Like, they just want to be with you. They're just over the top want to be with you, which I love. And then, the bulldogs are unique.
But my experience too with the bulldogs and the pugs and all those squishy faced dogs is they're so sweet. They're just so sweet.
Very sweet. And yeah.
We had a Shar-Pei, and not even for that long, but he was just the best and so sweet. People used to get scared of his face, like, he looked really serious.
Yeah.
But he was just the sweetest dog.
Oh.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Can you speak briefly about the human-animal bond and how that relates to welfare and what's actually happening now with animal welfare? Do you see any changes happening?
I think through COVID, people started to recognize the importance of animals, the human-animal bond, the role of animals in our family, because there were so many adoptions, right? Just so many adoptions. I think then people, as they went back to work, also started to realize that they weren't considering the dog's needs, that they were probably considering their own in bringing these dogs into their families because some were not well socialized. At the same time, and they didn't think through the fact that I have to go back to work, right? And all these things that came into effect there. Yeah, and I need fairness too. I had a dog during COVID. EJ came here right before COVID, and it was hard to socialize him, right? And we're still dealing with some of the outfalls of that. But I think with all the individuals who gave up these pets as they went back to work and so forth, and our shelters right now are just ridiculously overflowing, right? It's just shelters across Canada. And it just speaks again to hopefully some of those experiences that people had to give up dogs that they loved but didn't fit into their family anymore, or for economic reasons. That's another reason, right? Probably no one's fault there. But recognizing the bond that they did have and how difficult that was for them and how difficult it was for the dog, right? So hopefully people can take that experience and think about that. But I think overall, just people taking dogs into their lives, which is awesome, but then also giving them up really reflects how we see animals now, which is not all that great, right? We still eat them, we wear them, we cage them, we do all of that. And I think we have come a long ways and I think COVID propelled us forward for people's recognition, and people gave up dogs because they knew it was in the dog's best interest, which is great, so I think there was a whole bunch of reasons as to why, but even though it propelled us forward in our thinking, I don't think we are all that much forward from where we were. But then you think, even if you think of zoos now, I remember saying probably was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's like, oh, I wonder if, by the time I leave this earth, if we're going to get rid of zoos. Well, for the most part, we don't have a circus anymore. And zoos are rescues. There's a lot of rescues going on in zoos. So that has switched fast, right? And that's from public pressure and outcry, which is really awesome. So maybe things are better than I kind of think they are sometimes, but yeah.
I hope also, as the kind of work you're doing and the kind of work now that you're even involved with as a co-investigator with Dr. MJ Barrett's study, I hope that people can start to see animals differently and understand our relationship with them differently, and maybe that will help in some way see them as in our differently than maybe society has viewed animals in the past. So Colleen, on that note, I wanted to ask you, given your academic background and the kinds of disciplines you've been involved with in the past and the kinds of work you have done in the past, how did you decide to, tell us about your journey as a co-investigator on that study, which is looking at, a very different aspect and a different dimension of actually communicating with animals intuitively, and how you've made sense of that as a researcher and as someone in academia?
Well, I think that's the most important part is our role and our responsibility as academics is to leave no stone unturned. I don't know how to say it better than that, is to account for everything. And it's often these anomalies and things we don't think we're going to find which are most important, which will take us down a new path and move knowledge forward, right? So, looking at animal communication through a Western type lens is nothing I knew much about at all. But my work in Indigenous health absolutely does. So for me, again, One Health, looking at animals, humans, environment, that's nothing new, right? And so I was well aware of these relationships and connections, but from an Indigenous worldview or an Indigenous knowledge base. So for me, it was taking some of that understanding and framing that within this Western world that we live in. And that's where I kind of situate myself and my struggles and my understandings and whatever. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of this process and being a part of this academic journey, I bet a lot of it will have to do with, on an individual level and on a bigger level about conditioning and learning and unlearning and really opening ourselves up to different ways of thinking, different ways of knowing. So it'll be interesting to see, to see what comes from this, and then also how we can apply it on a larger scale. And if we're going to find these answers and do this exploration, it'll be interesting to see how we can, make sense of this in the real world and do a better job with the animal welfare and do a better job taking care of the animals. So
absolutely, I completely agree. And it's just about always thinking, right? Always thinking, always questioning, always being open. I think that's what our role is as an academic. That's what my role is. So no matter what it is, this is something I should consider and investigate and see how it fits. If it's someone's lived experience, then it's real and it's true, and it needs to find its home and fit in whatever model we're looking at or messages we're sharing or what have you, right? And that really fits well with my background in addictions research, because it's about people's lived and living experience. It's not for me to say, that's not my background. It's for me to help share their stories and bring them into a frame where our health systems could better understand how they could respond or how they can work with clients or what have you.
Right.
I've got a question for you, Colleen. It's a little off the topic, I guess, but you're an academic, you're a researcher, you have to be very precise, you have to be left brain, but at the same time, you do this incredible work with animals and people. You deal with people in very difficult situations in prisons and hospitals and dealing with drug addiction and all that. How do you find a balance within yourself that you can have this big open heart as you're doing what you need to do in your work, but then come back to, this very grounded kind of work that you do as a researcher and a professor and all that?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think in all of it, it's just being authentic to who you are. Just no matter what I'm doing, I'm just me, right? So I don't give a lot of, I don't know, whatever the word is, to being a professor. It's a privilege. It's a privilege where I find myself, and I have a huge responsibility to work with that privilege and to make positive change, or what I think is positive change from the information that I gather. And so that change is either going to be an academic article, like our controlled trial study from the emergency department. I think we had 10,000 views in 3 days or something. That I need to do more of that, but I also need to do the knowledge translation component, which is turning our work into videos or things like this, right? A podcast like this of information sharing. And then also being in the field to really better understand what I'm doing. Because if I don't have that some understanding, I don't think you're getting a full picture. I don't think I can provide as full of a picture. And that's why when I started in the field, I started with the dog training, and we do right now I do 5 hours a week outside with trainers, with both EJ and Molly. And it's not to train them to do anything in particular. It's right now, it's for me to get to know Molly better, and her to get to know me, and me to see her in different situations, and her to see me and how we work our things out. And then the same for EJ. It's just keeping that up, that it's our one-on-one time, right? And he loves to please, and he loves the cookies and to show off what he can do. And so it's just our time together. And I think that's really, really important. And that translates into us being in the field. It would be no different. I see them as co-researchers, and they're providing me with information all the time. And I need to be aware of that, and I need to consider that.
And on that note, Colleen, we touched upon maybe like a tiny fraction of all the things you've done and all the things you currently do. So could you share with our audience where they can find you if they're interested in learning more about the work that you do?
Yeah, on social media, Positive Canine Connections, PAWS, Positive Canine Connections, and then my website at colleendell.com.
Amazing.
Is there anything else, Colleen, that you'd like to share with our audience before we close?
Oh, gee. No, if I had one message, I think it would just be, think like a dog, or think like a cat or a reptile or whatever. And it'll strengthen your relationship with your animal, with your companion animal. It can strengthen your relationship with other people, because it's teaching us to think outside of ourselves. And I think we kind of are in a society right now where we're a little self-centric. So yeah, that would be it, is think from the perspective of that animal. And that means you're going to really have to know who they are, and you're going to have to open up yourself to listening to who they are.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful answer.
Good.
And thank you for this entire time we've had together, and all that you bring to the world. It's just quite amazing, all the things you do. And it's always, it seems to me, in dedication to helping people and animals. And it's quite profound. And I've learned a lot here about you and about your work and about the animals and what's possible. I see you as a real way shower, a pioneer, creating all these new ways of working with animals and helping people. It's quite beautiful. So thank you very much.
I'm just fortunate I get to work with them. Like, who gets to work with their dogs, right?
Well, and on that note, Colleen, I think it's like, hearing your story about how you even got here and how you merged these different worlds of yours together really speaks to what's possible when we let our hearts guide us. Yeah. And we stay authentic and we stay true to who we really are and what lights us up. All the wonderful things we can do if we operate from that type of headspace and heart space. And thank you for really highlighting the importance of always being open to learn, always staying curious, staying authentic, and using whatever resources and, you said the privileges we have to contribute and to give back. Thank you so much, Colleen, for the conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's fun. And Molly.
And Molly. And Molly.
She always is like, she'll be sleeping and I'll say, Molly. She's like, yes. Her eyes are open.
So cute.
Really, thank you for all the work you've done, and thank you, so much gratitude for all the animals who you've worked with, who have guided you, who have, shared so much love and joy with the people they've interacted with. Yeah. So thank you to all of them too.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us in today's episode of Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm. To view the show notes for today's episode, visit animalsandus.com. You can also find us by that name on Instagram and Facebook.
And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released. And if you've enjoyed our podcast, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app. And before we go today, we'd like to share a short blessing for the animals.
We'd like to end this podcast by taking just a moment to be quiet. And we give thanks and blessings to these amazing animals that we share our lives with. They give us so much and ask for so little in return. We hope that you can keep the animals and all living beings in your heart and in your mind as you go about your day. Thank you so much for being here with us today.